Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me. Today we're talking about something a little different. It's a modern watch. This is one of my favorite releases from this year, which we saw released at Watches and Wonders by Zenith. This was released alongside a vintage revival. This is the Defy Extreme Diver. Now this is a watch that I connected with right away just because it's got a lot of character to it. Now the Defy line as a whole has a whole lot of character to it. The revival that they brought back is a good example of that. That of course is a design that dates back to 1969. The whole Defy collection started to kind of push the boundaries of design and some of these ideas. And there's a lot of really great Defy examples out there as a result. So I'm happy to see Zenith continuing this tradition for the Defy range in the form of the Defy Extreme models. Now, as you might expect with a name like Extreme, these are watches that have a lot of personality to them, and they are generally on the larger side. Now, one thing that I've been asking for from Zenith for a while is a new dive watch, and this Defy Extreme Diver is certainly that. They've gone straight into the deep end here with a 600-meter diver and a design that really kind of pulls some of the details that we saw in that 1969 model. That is a reference A3648, but it packages it in a very modern way. This looks like a thoroughly modern watch, and I think it's all the better for it. Now, there's a lot of details that I really love about this watch. There's also a few areas that represent slight misses on this watch, but overall, I really love this watch. I really love the package of this watch and the idea of this watch in Zenith's lineup. So this is a large watch. It's 42.5 millimeters in diameter as measured from the perimeter of the bezel. That is not inclusive of the crown guard, which sticks out a little bit further and takes up most of the 3 o'clock side of the case. It's about 15.5 millimeters thick and about 47.5 millimeters from end to end. There's no real lug on this watch to speak of. We'll get to the why in that in a little bit. But the case is titanium, so that mitigates a lot of the large numbers that we're dealing with here. And this overall does work as a very wearable watch with the right strap. There's a lot of angles here and textures going on. There are polished surfaces and brushed surfaces. And one of the most defining features is this 12-sided bezel piece that frames the dial. And the bezel sits on the outside of this. Now, as a design component, I think this 12-sided bezel piece is pretty cool, and it's echoed inside of the dial as well on an orange chapter ring here that is indexed to the minutes. I really enjoy that. However, a lot of the surfaces of those 12 facets are polished, and they draw a lot of attention as a result. The bezel feels like almost an afterthought as a result. The bezel works just fine, and I like it aesthetically, so I don't have a huge problem with it. And it certainly lends to the overall personality of the watch, but I do wish that that fixed 12-sided piece here was fully brushed, just so it wouldn't call so much attention to itself. Now, that said, all the other details on this watch are pretty bold as well, so there's a lot of big items kind of competing for attention here. This is a time and date watch with an oversized hour and minute hand with these huge tips that accept a lot of lume on them. So it's quite legible overall, but again, there's a lot of polished facets going on the hour markers, and again on that bezel piece, and on the chamfers of the case. So there's a lot of highlights kind of glaring back at you when you look at the watch. When you compare it to something like an FXD, for instance, that is kind of a muted, dull, brushed surfaces everywhere you look, and puts all of the focus on the legibility of the dial. This doesn't have that. There's a lot of things that are kind of competing for your attention. But that said, at the right angles, this is an exceedingly legible watch, thanks to these rather unique hands. Now, looking into the dial, there is a slight texture here on the base black dial. It's a 4-sided star that is a callback to the old Zenith logo. I think it works pretty well here in the dial. It's not something that you notice at every angle. You really kind of have to have it in the right light to see it. It does get a date over at the 3 o'clock position, and to be honest, I think they could have just committed to this hardcore diver element and left the date off of this altogether. Now, let's face it, this is likely not a watch that many people will be buying to put to use in everyday situations. So having kind of a daily practical complication like that, I don't think really needs to be here, and it kind of takes away some of that focus on what they're trying to achieve with this watch. But that's not my real issue with it. It's the execution that I think struggles here a little bit with the date. And I say that because the typeface that's used on the date disc itself is rather tall and narrow. And the typeface everywhere else on the watch, from the dial to the bezel, is kind of this short, squat, muscular numbers and letters, and we don't really see that followed through here in the date window. I would like to see a similar style that we see on the bezel reflected in the date window itself. I think that would have been pretty cool. But that's a really small detail and not a deal breaker in my opinion. I really love the big colors that we use here. The oranges work really well against this black example. It also comes in a blue example as well. Overall, I think the design is really sharp. I really like what they have going on here. This does use an El Primero movement, and it is visible through an exhibition case back. I could probably do without that as well, but it kind of is what it is with this one. If they could have achieved this in something like a 13mm thick case, I would have been over the moon with it. But that said, this is a very wearable watch, and as I mentioned, a big part of that is one of the straps that comes with it. The rubber textile strap here is exceptional. It has a high amount of flexibility to it, and it's just really comfortable to wear. It really kind of secures the rather large watch head to the wrist, and since it's made out of titanium, it's really not something that you notice on your wrist when you're wearing it with this strap. It's almost a jarring experience to look down and see such a huge watch when you don't really feel anything on your wrist thanks to this strap and the titanium case. And that brings up one of my favorite features of this watch, and that is the quick release system here for the straps. On the underside of the case, there's a small button that you can press, and it releases the strap, which is affixed by a pair of hooks that kind of go into the case. It's something that you can do really quickly and easily. Now, I usually have an issue with systems like this that don't use a traditional spring bar because it eliminates the possibility of you using just any normal strap with the watch. However, there is a link that you can put in there that allows you to use a 20mm pass-through strap, and that is one of the 3 straps that comes with this watch. So that will allow you to use any of your existing strap collection with the watch, and I think that's a great thing for something like this. That said, I probably still wear it on this rubber textile strap more often than not because it's just that good, and of course it's going to be a little bit slimmer on the wrist as well. This does come with a titanium bracelet as well that uses the same system. I'm not overly fond of that bracelet, but it's nice to have it, and I'm glad that Zenith ships this with 3 separate strap options. This watch is $11,300, which is no small sum. Now, in some ways that feels fair, but the fit and finish isn't quite what I would want at that price point. There is a bit of play in the bezel. It doesn't have quite the crisp feeling that I would like in a watch at that price point. And again, small details like the typeface on the date wheel. It does have a helium escape valve as well along the 9 o'clock side, but it doesn't sit flush with the case. It kind of sticks out a little bit. Those are all things that I would expect just a slightly higher degree of execution on a watch at this price point. Overall, though, I really love this watch, and I love it as a first step into a new collection of dive watches from Zenith, and I dearly hope that we see more along these lines. I'd love to see a dateless version of this and a more kind of hardcore brushed version of the case. There's a lot of potential in this design, so I think Zenith really nailed the design language of that old school A3648 here in this design. So I'm really excited about what this could lead to in the future. And now these are just my first impressions of this watch. I'll have more of my thoughts available online that I will link down below. Overall, really awesome release here from Zenith. I'd love to hear what you think about this Defy Extreme Diver. Be sure to leave your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. That'll do it for this one. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. And if you enjoy this content, a like and a share goes a long way. Thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, take care.